Empower your leadership journey with the CEO Series. Whether you're at the gym, strolling, or commuting, our impactful dialogues with world-class leaders are just a click away. Immerse yourself in the minds of visionaries shaping today's most influential companies and innovations. It's not just an interview. It's a masterclass in leadership. Don't miss out. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major streaming platforms.
Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it is the CEO Series, where we bring together the most phenomenal global business leaders, and they walk us through their career journey. Today, I'm honored to introduce our guest, Lou Dubois. Lou is an accomplished brand storyteller and creative executive who has left an indelible mark on some of the world's most recognized brands, such as NBC News, Home Depot, Hilton Worldwide. Lou's journey is nothing short of extraordinary. His work has earned both a Peabody and Emmy Award, and his team consistently deliver award-winning content across platforms. So with that, I want to welcome Lou Dubois. Lou, how are you, man?
Hey, Ron. Great to see you. Thanks for having me, and happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. So thank you so much for being a guest on the show. To give some background to this, and I was just reciting to Lou this story. Lou and I met years ago in New York, and Lou did a little feature article in Inc. magazine. He was writing for Inc. magazine at that time. And you could not have told me anything that I was in Inc. magazine. So that's how we connected. And the key to a relationship is that you stay in touch with people over the years. And that's been umpteen years ago. So thank you for being a guest. So we normally start the show with talking about, you've had a fantastic career. You're the first award-winning, Emmy Award-winning person on the show, first of all. So walk us through your career journey from where you started to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always great to keep in touch, as you said, with friends, colleagues, sources over those many years. And here we are, finding ourselves a couple of years later, right? So I've got a very interesting, I'd call it nonlinear career journey. I think that's pretty traditional these days, but maybe a little less so back when we were coming out. I started my career in journalism. I really was fascinated and grew up loving the art of writing, the art of production. So I majored in journalism in college, minor in film studies. So ultimately didn't really know what I was going to do with those to start out with, but started my career writing for magazines. So to your point, Inc. magazine was one of those that was big. Sports Illustrated here in the US was really the first magazine I got my start at. That is probably the preeminent sports journalism publication and has been here in the US for, about 50 years or more. Best photojournalism, best journalism, really the sort of driver of news for that industry. I think that magazines went through an interesting sort of shift in the time that I was there. And so that was really when digital media kind of came about as we know it today in its really impotence. So made the shift from magazines to digital and working on websites, working on online platforms, kind of the intersection of all different media types that we now see come to life today. I did that for quite a few years, including at some startups. I was at Inc. at the time, which is when we met, Ron, and then made the jump to television, which is always kind of where I thought that using all of those skills that we talked about would be really helpful. So I spent, as you said, about 3.5 years at NBC News in New York City, working at 30 Rock. Amazing experience covering presidential elections, Olympics, and everything in between that kind of goes with working in news. I always tell people that news is something that never ends, particularly in the world that we live in today. And so very exhausting couple of years, I would say, working, sort of 24/7 in that cycle, but also some of the most enjoyable in my career. And I think that made some of the most amazing connections, friends, people that I've ever gotten to meet. I made a really interesting career pivot in 2014, which is crazy to say because it's now 10 years ago. to work in the brand side of the business, so more on the business side than the editorial side of journalism. I had an opportunity when I was at NBC and NBC Universal. This was after the Comcast acquisition of NBC to go into the corporate side of the business, which encompassed about 60 plus brands under the NBC Universal portfolio, everything from theme parks to film studios, cable networks, and really to build out a content and creative team across the corporate window. It was an awesome opportunity at a time when the company was going through so much change. And for me to be able to come in and build something from scratch, it gave me just such an amazing view of what was possible when it comes to brands being able to tell their own story in addition to leaning on media. That will be a lot of what we get into today, I'm sure. I left NBC after about 5 years. I was super happy in that corporate role, was in no rush to leave, but had an opportunity to go to Hilton Worldwide, as you said. Big traveler, much like you are, Ron. And so I think the opportunity to work for, one of the preeminent travel brands in the world, a company that really kind of invented the global hospitality ecosystem as we know it today, was something I really couldn't turn down. And it was a chance to go and build something from scratch again, which I love doing. I think it'll be a kind of through line throughout our conversation. But the ability to go into something that had existed for so long and sort of help them modernize and change some of what their business was really amazing. I was lucky to celebrate 100th anniversary of Hilton while I was there. So being able to use all of those journalism chops, but also the brand storytelling that we talked about a little bit, to really bring to life what it meant to be a 100-year-old hospitality company. Wow. And then the last stop, as you mentioned, Home Depot. I spent the last few years of my career there before going out on my own here recently. So similar kind of role at Home Depot as to Hilton. An amazing company here in the U.S. Obviously, you probably know about it, Ron, but the biggest home improvement retailer actually in the world as well. And I think the 15th biggest company in the Fortune 500. So interesting career journey for sure, and happy to jump into any details.
Yeah, one of the key points that you talked about, the industry you were in, the industry was going through transformation, but you were able to kind of sense that and make a pivot. And I know a lot of people, because when I was at Martha Stewart, so we were big in the publishing business, and the magazine was this thick now. The magazine no longer exists. Guide someone, if you could give a few nuggets for people in an industry that's going through transformation as to how they would should think about it in terms of a career and building long term. You've gone through quite a few hits and you've pivoted, and you were very successful in doing that. What advice would you give to someone who's in an industry? They read the paper, they see there's layoffs here, they see this is not happening, maybe they're not happy here. What advice would you give them?
Well, the first thing I would say is it's harder and harder to read a paper these days, right? To your point, I think that the biggest thing I would tell people is, change is constant in this world that we live in now. It's very different and very accelerated from where we were maybe 15, 20, even 30 years ago. And so, what you might think to be normal in sort of your business world today, in 5 years may well be replaced. And so I think that for you to be able to pivot, to think about what's next, to think about really the opportunities to use those skills that you talk about ultimately in whatever role that it is you control, and apply those to those different new businesses that have come along. I've always been a fan of learning. I think that continuing to learn and teach yourself things is something you should be doing throughout your career. But I think you have to look for those pivots and those opportunities that ultimately may not exist today. I always tell people, like, the job you're going to hold 3 years from now may not actually exist. And that's okay. That's kind of the world that we live in right now. Yeah. And industries have changed too. So as you said, it's been, I think probably in the last 20 years, the most rapid acceleration of change in most of the media, entertainment, content consumption space. And so to be able to be on the front lines of that, but also to move around, as you said, to a lot of different mediums, it's been enjoyable. It's terrifying sometimes as well, right? I think there's a lot of unknowns that go with it, but I think part of any journey to me is the unknown, and I think that's where I've been really both lucky and also honest with myself that this may not be the right next step, but sometimes you've got to take that chance.
Take that chance, test the waters, and see what comes out. One of the other key points that you mentioned, the degree in journalism and background in film, I think it was. Digital wasn't even thought about. And then once you got into, to the business from that side of it, and all of a sudden digitalization came up. But you can't even read an article today unless they're talking about digitalization. That's a major career shift.
Yeah.
But apparently you were smart enough to realize and kind of sense it, that I needed to change and get a different skills. So the question I'm trying to ask is that, how did you stay consistent with your learning journey? You're in print, but you see digital here. And how do I learn about digital? What was that process like? Because you were in a major transformative space.
Yeah. Well, I'm probably going to date us both a little bit here, Ron.
That's okay.
But when I started my career, Blackberries were still a big thing, right? And I think that when you think about the way in which we communicated, that was such a critical part of the business relationship. Two years into my career, some guy in California invented something called the iPhone, which I think revolutionized, honestly, the way that all of us around the world communicate. Whether you're an Apple person, a Samsung person, whatever your device is, smartphones now have really just changed the game for everyone. And I think the way that we consume all media and all content. So to me, if I told you back in 2008 that I knew what I was doing when I moved to, sort of digital technologies and understanding everything with the iPhone, I'd be lying to you. But I think that it's taking time to step back, to be honest, that you don't know everything. I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with in the business world. Being okay to say, I don't know, and to listen to somebody else who does know sometimes has really been critical in my career. And to your point, as a career learner, I really took a lot of opportunities, really every opportunity I could, to work with many of my mentors, which I know we'll get into a little bit later, people who I just trusted that had so much wealth of experience in many different worlds, to listen and learn from all of them, right? I think that as any platform or medium comes about, you've got to be apt and willing to change. But at the same time, at the core of what we're talking about here, you have to understand how to do your role, whatever that job is. And I think that using that foundation of journalism, using that foundation that I established in print, there's parts of that come through every day in my job still. And so, being able to write, being able to edit, being able to listen, to ask questions, to be curious, those are great skills of journalists that ultimately, to me, make me the brand storyteller that I am today as well.
Yeah. When we go to university, we have this vision of getting that degree, and we're going to do 1, 2, 3. You mentioned non-linear. And lots of times the people that are coming out with these degrees, they're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, as if it's so methodical, and it's not like that. What advice would you give them for someone who has that vision of, I'm going to be the publisher of XYZ magazine?
Yeah.
And I'm asking that in the context of, you sense what's happening outside. You sense the digital piece was coming, and you maybe realize that maybe I need to upskill as it relates to that.
I think it's being okay with the unknown, as I talked about. Ultimately, you can take any job, and I think that especially when you're young in your career coming through university, I don't think there's a bad job that you can take when you start out. I think ultimately any experience you get when you're young is going to be great experience that you carry with you throughout your career. I was super lucky and have been really lucky throughout my career to have, as I said, amazing mentors and leaders that taught me, in each of those different stops as well, the things that I didn't know. And I think ultimately for anybody young that I talk to, and I do a lot of this as well, as I know you do, it's really aligning yourself with people who you can learn from. I think that's always one of the most critical parts of any job that you take, is making sure that you're working with people who are smarter than you, that you can learn something from, and in companies and industries that maybe you are not an expert in. I don't think going in and pretending you know everything is ever a good place to start. And so I think listening intently, being curious, being creative at the same time, that teaches you ultimately what then is going to guide you for the rest of your career. So that's what I tell a lot of young people. I think, we talk about digitization and the way that the world has changed in the last 20 years. The next 5, 10, 15 years is probably going to change even more. And so if you're a young person coming out, it's super exciting because you don't know maybe what the next 5 or 10 years look like, but that's on you to make sure that you're keeping up with as well.
You mentioned mentors. If you had to think back to your career to this point, who would be a few of the biggest inspirational people, inspirational slash mentors in your life, and how did they guide you through whatever it was at that particular time?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer that we're all a product of the world in which we come up in, right? And I think whether that's the people, the situations we surround ourselves in. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, an amazing upbringing, very middle class family, but I watched my parents work hard every day, and they instilled a sense of work ethic in me that I've carried with me throughout my career. I think that I'd have to start with my dad and my mom for sure. I think professionally, you never know who's going to be a mentor, right? I think that's one of the funny things as you kind of develop those relationships. And I've been, as I said, super lucky to have leaders who then became friends who also became mentors throughout my career. And so,
Mhm.
I've got a couple of them that I'm happy to sort of talk in detail about. One of them is a close friend I'm actually hanging out with tonight here in town. Greg Gitrich is a guy I worked with twice in my career, both at NBC actually. And he's just one of those visionary digital leaders that I've worked with in my career and became a great friend and mentor that I bounce things off of all the time. I think that mentorship to me, and I've done on the other side too, because I mentor quite a few younger folks now. And I think it's to your larger point. I think you have to give back. That's a big part of the world that we live in. But I think it has to be a two-way relationship, and it has to be something that happens not just when you need something for mentorship to actually work. And so for me, it's always been about maintaining relationships, even just to get to know what people are working on, how they're doing, what's new, what they're seeing when you have nothing that you need from them, right? And I think that's probably the most critical part of a mentor-mentee relationship is developing the actual relationship itself.
Exactly. Relationship building is so huge today. It's like sometimes you look on your phone and you see a call coming in and you said, nope, not going to take it because
Yeah.
it's just going to be a drain of your energy level to deal with it. But it's never a two-way street. It's always a one-way kind of
Yep.
approach to that. So you've gone from journalism to brand architecture, and you see all the talk today. I don't want to say this. I want to say this in a professional way. It's the branding. It's the brand architect. It's all of this. So, what does that mean to become a brand architect? Because one of the things I've kind of morphed into is to tell specifically college students, you have to build a brand as to who you are, how you were developed, how you can approach a situation. Talk
Yeah.
walk us through kind of a short journey on this whole branding concept and the meaning behind it, because that's such a big phrase today.
Well, look at where we are today, Ron. I mean, you are a great embodiment of exactly what you talk about here. I think that you've created a brand for yourself and with the CEO series that, without, digital technology, as we talk about, probably didn't exist 20 years ago. And so I think that, when we talk about branding, we talk about brand architecture. This isn't new, I would say. It's just probably a new way for people to talk about it. And so,
Okay.
if you think about really the way businesses have run for a long time, they were always very transactionally driven, right? It's about sell products, market to the people that are already buying your product, and maybe get some new customers. But really, the core and crux of marketing was around product and performance marketing. And
Okay.
so I think what has changed in the last, let's call it 20 years, really more than anything, is this willingness and desire for consumers to connect with the people that they do business with on a deeper
Mhm.
level. They want
Mhm.
the brands that they spend their money with. They want the businesses that they ultimately spend their time and effort and hard-earned paychecks on to stand for something beyond just what they sell. And so that's where I think being a brand, and I'm using brand a little bit in air quotes here as we talk about that, you have to stand for more than just what you sell. I think this is where we see values, we see mission, we see purpose, we
Yeah.
see how you show up in the communities in which you operate, your DEI initiatives, your sustainability initiatives in the world. All of those things, they existed, but we probably didn't talk about them 20 years ago, right? And I think that, that is what encompasses in totality a brand. Now,
Mhm.
you still have to sell product and you still have to have whatever it is that you are there for. And probably more than ever, I think I tell people, you actually have to deliver on what you say you're selling better than ever to show up in those other ways. But I think
Mhm.
that all of those softer sort of pieces of the brand that we talk about there is really what I think has been modernized in the last 15 or 20 years. And I think there's a real opportunity for people to connect with brands on a deeper level, as I said. So that's where the storytelling comes in. That's where ultimately finding ways to really find your brand champions, if you will, right? I think is a good way to think about it. We all have fans. We're probably all fans of different brands that we can talk about. If you are a brand, identify who those fans are and make them brand champions that can use their own networks to help empower what you do as well.
Yeah. I saw one of your products. I think you were with Home Depot, and it wasn't about what we sell. It wasn't about any discount. And you just talked. I think the video was about people that work there and the lives behind that, and that was connecting because I tell people when you look at career sites, like I work with a lot of HR departments, what are you talking about the brand of working there? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Because you go to any career site, all you get is a bunch of jobs. Talk to me about what the interview process. Talk to me about how you guys have fun. Talk to me about all these things. But sometimes there's a disconnect in that world.
Yeah.
And they haven't quite bought into that whole branding piece that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I think every human being in the world has a story to tell, right? And I think inside of these organizations, even more so, if you use your people to tell the story of who you are as a brand, that is always what makes you most powerful. And so, I think the Home Depot stuff that you talked about was really critical for us as we talk about, ultimately when we were there, it's not just what you buy at the store, but it's the interactions you have with that associate every time you walk in the door. And if it's a good interaction, you're probably going to come back. If it's a bad one, you may go down the street to the other competitor, right? And I think that goes through with any business that we talk about. For hospitality, when I was at Hilton, this is a business built around customer service, right? It's built around interactions. And, I used to say all the time, and I think this is now a phrase that our CEO at Hilton, who's still there, uses quite often. But, at the end of the day, and this kind of goes for any business, our hotels were just buildings without those people, right? They're literally just structures. And so, any business that you're in, use those people. They are those brand champions that we talk about to help tell your story.
I saw a quote the other day. It says that your employees are your number one brand ambassadors. And that discussion was around people leaving and talking about what it was like to work there versus leaving. It was the greatest job ever, but there was an opportunity that came up. Yep. And I think that the work that we talk about with branding and storytelling has to come down into, I'm going to go back into my space as kind of the HR department, because you have 1,200 employees. Each 1,200 is going out telling a story, in some way. But we could dive deeper into that, but we're not. So we'll leave it at that. So you've managed large teams across the U.S. How does Lou manage people? What is Lou's leadership style like?
Yeah, listen, I think it's a developing and continually evolving process. I would say any good leader should tell you that. I think it's an amalgamation of some of those other leaders that I've had that I talked about earlier that I learned from. And it's really being reactive to the teams that you have. I've had, to your point, small teams, large teams, distributed teams, right? I had, and especially the last role at Home Depot, a team that was spread around the country. And I think that to be a good leader, you have to be a great listener. And so to me, I've always sort of driven myself through what we call servant leadership. I'm sure you're very familiar with the concept, but really being there when people need it, being there to help them to figure out how to get to the next step and whatever that might be, whether it's the career that they're seeking, the project they're working on, the people they're trying to talk to. I think being a listener and a supporter. And I think the last part for me is helping them to figure out how to do it themselves, right? I think it's probably one of the hardest things when you go from being an independent contributor in some of these companies to being a leader is you have to empower your teams to do great work as much as you have to do it yourself. And so, I take great pride and actually really enjoy managing teams to your point, because I love to see people learn and grow and do well. And that's to me more rewarding than anything personally that I ever do, right? Is seeing my team do really well, because that shows that number one, they're great at working together. They're great at listening and learning and growing. And ultimately that then makes all of us that work around them better. So I think being a leader is very difficult today for a lot of reasons in the kind of workspace that we all work within. But I think if you take the right notes and cues from your team, as we talked about here, you can really learn a lot from them as much as they learn from you.
Yeah. One of the young ladies that worked for me years and years ago, she said, "You're such a cheerleader." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, I can always notice that, you're always cheering people on, because she and I worked together, and she was just coming into the business, and mentor relationship was very strong. And now she's doing great things. And I said, nothing inspires me more than open up LinkedIn and here you are, you just completed this project, or someone's singing your praises of people that you worked for and guided through. You
Yep.
can't put a dollar value to that. You can't. There's no way to do that. And if you're trying to put a dollar value to it, you're not doing it from the heart.
So
So to speak.
1,000%. And I
Yeah.
think for that woman you talk about, she probably has not told you, but it means so much to her every time that you do that cheerleading, right? And I think that is, to me, another part of leadership is being humble enough and smart enough to recognize your team, right? Because I think we all live in a world where it's easy to take credit for other people's work very often, right? And I think that to me, if you don't shout out the people who have done the hard work on that project, other people in your organization may never know who actually did all of it. And so to me, every time I was in a leadership meeting, even with the C-suites, it's like, these are the people who did this, who made this happen, right? Because then they feel empowered, they feel recognized to go and do it again. And the leaders that I'm talking to them about, they understand that they've got a great talent pool. To go back to your HR side, this may be the pipeline they need to be thinking about, right? This is the retention that they need to be considering as they think about, you're not going to keep everybody, but if we keep these people who are really good that we're talking about, they're the ones who are getting things done.
That's so important. So you're in a level up, level 1 or 2 up, but you're talking about someone that could have been the digital manager for a product that was maybe 4 levels down on an org chart, but you bringing them up in that meeting. That's a
1,000%.
concept. That's a concept that you're recognizing your team, because as you said, lots of times things are stolen, that I was the creative genius behind that. That's so important today, because I hear so many stories from young people do great work, and then they don't get the recognition from that. So if you could give a shout out to leaders, the importance of recognizing your team, because we're all kind of in this together. You aspire, you're successful, the team is going to be successful. Can you give us kind of a thought process on that?
Well, I think it's twofold, right? I think to the young employees who you say complain about not having opportunities, I think this is a growth window for them, right? For them to not only do the work, but then to go into those rooms with leaders and talk about the work that they did. I think that is, for me, it's a great chance to grow them individually and to say, listen, like, you may have done the amazing work. Now I need you to present it out to the biggest leaders in the company. And I think that can be terrifying, but also an amazing learning experience. I think on the other side, for me, you are an embodiment of your team at the end of the day. I think that no matter what role you are in, the people who work with and for you are representative of what you stand for in that company. And so if you're not comfortable bringing literally anyone from your team, and I mean anyone, from the lowest ranking person in your organization to your deputy along with you, you probably need to think about the staff that you have again. And I think that's, to me, where we're looking at hiring and retention and all those things come into play. But it's, again, about empowerment. It's really making sure that those people up and down your organizational chart have ability and understanding to go and present that work to anybody and anybody.
I'm going to tell you now, I'm going to steal that phrase. You are the embodiment of your team. I just wrote that down. I said, okay, I'll attribute it to you,
Yeah.
whenever I use it. So that's cool, as it relates to that. So you talked about giving back, the importance of that through maybe universities or whatever it is, or maybe the trade association. Why is it important to give back? Why is that important for a leader to give back?
Gosh, we don't have enough time probably to get into all of this, Ron. I think that yeah, I'll be short. Trust me. Listen, our role in life and careers, whatever it is to make the next generation better, right? And I think that any of us who told you that we are in the place that we are today because we did it ourselves is lying to you. It comes from those generations before us. So I think for all of us, it is our duty, our responsibility to give back to that next generation in whatever way that makes sense for you, right? So to your point, for me, mentorship is a big part of it. I've done a lot of different programs over the course of my career. I was on the board at a group in New York called iMentor that was really one of the most transformative organizations I ever worked with, really empowering a lot of younger, really underprivileged children who are coming up through the high school system in New York City, whether it be single parents or people that maybe that didn't have as many opportunities as others, but showing them that there was a path, right? And then, I keep in touch with quite a few of those kids who now are quite a bit older, I'll call it. And it's awesome to see how well they're doing. I do a lot with my university here in the U.S. too. I went to a small college in Florida, Flagler College. It's a great liberal arts school in St. Augustine, Florida. Beautiful town to visit if you ever want to go to Florida. But I do a lot to give back to them as well, because again, I think it is our responsibility to give back to that next generation, to tell them what we have learned so that they can then go on and do even better things than all of us, so that they can then learn that that's how they give back to their generations below them as well. So it's very cyclical to me. It's really critical, no matter what giving back means to you. Find those different methods and avenues, but do it, because ultimately it's going to make you a better person, and it's going to make the world a better place as we move forward as well.
Wow. So we've all received awards. I mean, leadership award or marketing awards or whatever. But when you go to the Peabody and the Emmy Award, that's a totally different level of recognition. What did that feel like to, the nominating process, but to be able to win that award and you look back on your body of work?
Yeah.
Walk us through that moment.
Well, I think what's great, the greatest part of both of those awards that you talk about, and in the journalism world, the Peabody is probably the biggest because it's voted on by your peers. And so that means a lot. I think the Emmy, there are a lot of different Emmys that are handed out, but both of those for me, what sticks out is they were part of much larger teams. And so they were big projects that I worked on with some of the smartest people that I've ever worked with in my career. And again, as we talk about roles and responsibilities, every person who was a part of those projects played a key role in making those what they were. And that's why they won awards, right? They won awards because we all knew how to bring together this awesome team of people. I think that, the nomination process, I'll be honest, it's a little murky in some of them, because I think you don't learn that you've been nominated until you kind of go through the process. There were, particularly at NBC, people who were focused on, submissions for awards and things of that nature. Both of these were submitted. But I think that, when you learn, I wouldn't say awards are what you should strive for in your career. They're great validation sometimes that the work you did was as meaningful as you maybe thought it was. And again, to me, it's really just fond memories of the teams that I worked with on those projects, because, I think you look back, and both of those are now 10 plus years ago. For me, they remain two of the most exciting, enjoyable projects I've worked on in my career. And it's not just because of the work. The work was amazing. Don't get me wrong. The deliverables, the products that we came out with were awesome, but it was those teams as well that I got to work with. So those are my memories. That's kind of how it all flows. And I think that, it's always nice to be recognized, but I think that know that that's not the ultimate goal when you go into these projects as well. And I think that's really critical for people to recognize too. So.
So you said nonlinear, and you've gone through all of these. If you could kind of, I would say this was important. If you, looking back on your career, which one of those U-turns or left turn, right turn would you say I'm most proud of? And it opened up another aura of career trajectory or whatever it would be. Is there one that you could choose? I mean, you work with all these storied brands, you were at NBC and all these things. That's an amazing career.
Yeah, listen, I think it's not a cop-out. I think I've learned a little bit from every one of those brands. I think if I had to pick one, it's probably NBC, just because of the breadth of the work that I was able to do in my time there. So working in news and then moving to the corporate side, as I said, being able to work across what was at the time 60 plus different brands inside of their portfolio, it really showed me what was possible when you think about the brands that we talk about today. So, again, working with theme parks, working with film studios, working with cable networks. We had a lot of digital properties that were part of our client base too. So Fandango is a big distributor of film tickets here in the U.S. They were a big part of that business. Golf Now, the sports business and what they do. So I think I learned what was possible in that role in that company when we talk about big kind of multi-tiered brands, and that's kind of carried with me. When I was at Hilton, we had 30 brands, right? We ultimately, when you think about hotel portfolios, there's a lot of different brands, and even at Home Depot, we had 30,000 brands that we sold within our stores, and so they're all part of what makes that brand come to life. All those individual products, and I think that that NBC experience really told me how to bring together, some of these incredible brands and really to tell one compelling story as best we can.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. If you were to have the opportunity, and I know sometimes we'll hear these kind of questions, if you could go back and talk to your younger self coming out of university, or maybe that first job, what advice would you give to this person? You mentioned nonlinear, you mentioned career disruptions, you mentioned all these things. What piece of advice, couple of pieces of advice that would you give them?
Yeah, there's a few things I would tell myself. I think it's, as we talked about earlier, it's to always be learning. I think that especially in this world of constant change, you have to continue to educate yourself on what's going on in the world around you. I think to not get discouraged with failure is probably a big one. I think that a lot of us are perfectionists by nature. I would say that I for sure was one of those people early in my career that anytime things didn't go well, I thought I did something wrong. But failure is actually sometimes when you learn the most. And I think that to me, knowing that earlier in my career would have been great. And that can happen on many levels. That can be a project. It might be a job that you take, as I talked about, that didn't really work out as you would have intended. I think if I'm being honest, like I've been laid off twice, right? I think ultimately, you have to be prepared that in this world we live in, it's not always going to be the right opportunity for you. And I think being able to roll with the punches and tell yourself, it's not you, you're fine, you're going to be good, your skills are going to translate as long as you continue to do great work and learn from that job, no matter whether it was good, bad, or ugly, you're going to take from those experiences and move forward with it. So those would be the things I'd probably tell myself, if I go back.
Yeah, I saw a stat the other day. I can't quite quote the percentage, but a high percentage of people realize they've made the wrong choice in a job the first week of work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was over the 50 percentile. And I'm thinking, and I'm going to go back to the branding concept. Do we think about the brand that we create for new people coming in?
Yeah.
Do we think about how we make it more welcoming and from them? Because it was a discussion I was leading around onboarding and the importance of welcoming someone into a company. So if you think of that from human resources, I always say, here's one of your brands, employee engagement. Here's another brand. Here's all those kind of things. And the more we talk and the more I read about the concept of the brand in quotes, I realize there's something there.
Yeah.
For people to feel as if I know I made the right choice.
I think you're going to know, to your point, whether you made the right choice in that first week, sometimes the first month, pretty quickly. And I think that onboarding process you talk about, yeah. I've worked with many of my HR teams in these companies because it is probably the most critical part of that employee journey is those first couple of weeks and making somebody feel comfortable, number one, but also, yes, that they made the right decision. I think, as much as moving jobs has become a little more common today, it's still a major leap that people are taking when they go to a new company. And regardless of how many questions you asked in the interview process or everything you did from a research perspective before you started at that company, it's still terrifying in that first couple of weeks to make sure that you are landing in the right spot. And I think it's the responsibility of employers. It's the responsibility of the brands, as we talk about it here. The HR teams, to your point, to be conduits of that brand. I think that ultimately, you have to bring that brand to life for somebody who has just come in from the outside and may have a wealth of different experiences, but is trying to understand how and why they fit best into this organization. And I think to me, we've had so much rapid change, as we talked about earlier, that that a lot of HR organizations are struggling, as you probably know better than anyone, at how best to kind of go through that process and how to make sure that people are getting what they need, but also, are going to stick around for a long time, because that's really the goal for most of these companies now, is to retain employees as much as to bring new ones in.
Yeah. So was it easy making the switch from your side of the brand architect, understanding branding, and now you're an entrepreneur. Now you're the brand. Your company is a brand. Was that an easy transition to make? Because I asked that in the context of, if a person who did not understand that concept, and now you're the one in the crosshairs.
Yeah.
Was that an easy transition? Well, nothing is really easy, but what I'm saying, that you understood it from the other side.
I think nothing is easy, to your point. I think there are parts of it that you can learn from your old life that make it easier, for sure. And I think that, to me, what makes the best individual contributors, entrepreneurs, whatever they are, is somebody who comes with that wealth of knowledge and experience as to what they need to do to work with their clients. I come at this from a very different perspective, right? That, having spent almost in my entire career in-house, versus somebody who maybe just started something on my own early on. I have a wealth of relationships. I have a wealth of knowledge from that in-house experience that I use every day in some of the work that I do today still. And I think that, ultimately being able to understand your own value proposition as much as you understand a brand's value proposition was a big part of it to me. We live in a world now where I think individual contributors are of great value to many companies for a lot of reasons. And I think that if you have the skills and the willingness to kind of sell yourself, right, in the way that you need to with these companies, there is great opportunity. I think that, I know this from being in-house too. I tell people these stories all the time, but it's often much easier for an organization to hire an individual contributor or a freelancer than to hire somebody on staff and pay them benefits and salary and all the things that go along with it. And so if you can find whatever your niche is, and I think that's the key, right? Find your niche that's going to make you valuable to the clients you're talking to. That's the most important part. And then, I'll be frank, there's some hard parts of it. The business development, I'm not great at. There's still parts of that I'm learning as we go through. It's not fun to cold call people sometimes and go through that process. But I think you learn, again, it's what we talk about throughout the call here, like ultimately you have to continue learning new skills. And I think that, continuing to do that in addition to what I brought from my past experiences has been what's helped me most.
Wow, that's amazing. So tell us about your company. Let's do a shout out to your company and what are you offering as a service, and give us a little spiel on that.
Yeah, nice little elevator speech. Cool. Yeah, so I started my own individual contributor kind of business here this year back in March. So still pretty new, only about 6 months old. But mostly what I've been doing is helping brands and also agencies at this kind of intersection of brand architecture, brand storytelling that we talk about. I use a lot of my experience that I talked about from being in-house to educate a lot of brands. I think that's a big part of it, through workshops and things of that nature, to kind of help people understand exactly what we're talking about today, and then bringing that to life through actual execution. And so there is a great divide in the way that we talk about brand storytelling between what brands are looking for and what their partners, the agencies, the creators, the independent kind of folks ultimately are delivering sometimes. And so trying to fill that gap as best I can, and doing it with brands who are willing to take risks, I think is the biggest part. So, I've had a really enjoyable kind of 6 months of doing this so far. I think working with big brands, small agencies, individual contributors, as I said, and ultimately, I think my goal with the business is to bring all of these groups to a place where we're all talking the same language. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is breaking down some of those walls that exist today, to let us all work better together as we move forward.
Wow, that's amazing. So what are you excited about the future? So you've got the business that you've set up. You have anything upcoming that maybe there's a podcast or something that you're going to be on, or you know what we forgot to mention? What is your company's branding? What is the name of your
It's just under my name. So it's just LouDubois.com is kind of what I've been using. And it's a bevy of services. We can get into probably another conversation of whether it's worth, starting an LLC or things of that nature. But yeah, it's been an independent property. I think in terms of your second question, what I'm excited about, I think, listen, there's a couple of projects I've got going on right now, some of which are not public yet, but as the year rolls through, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll probably see come to life. I am doing a few podcasts with other creative types, to your point, in the coming weeks and months that I think you can keep an eye out as well if you follow me on the socials. I think that a big part of this branding conversation, since it's really where we focused, is I've had to step back and think about, as you said, what is your personal brand through all of this? And I think that using platforms like LinkedIn, working with people like you, and talking to other smart people, you understand that it's critical to promote your work. It's critical to promote what you're talking about. And so, as much as I talked about empowering my teams earlier, that's a huge part still to me of growing, but then it's finding ways to empower yourself. And so that's what I'm excited about as we go through the fall. I've got quite a few things that you'll see coming out, but nothing probably quite as interesting as this. So thank you for having me on here too, Ron.
No, thank you. Well, in closing, I just want to mention this. One of the goals of the show was to create a platform. I got to be careful how I use these words because I'm talking to a branding expert. Is for bringing engaging leaders like yourselves to talk about their career journey, because as you said, nonlinear, we come out of school and think it's all going to be here. So the story is always about, how do you make these moves? What were your thoughts behind it? What's your leadership style and all those kind of things? Because I think it gives young people and even people in careers today, this is the real world versus what you may read here in a book of whatever it is. So are there any takeaways that you could give to the audience about being a guest on the show? Because you gave us a masterclass this morning. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. I think two things to me, I would say for folks as a takeaway. I think, and it's very kind of you to call me an expert. I think none of us are experts at the end of the day. I think we're all learning still as we go through our careers and lives together. I think, and that goes to my point of being a constant learner. I think you have to be, willing to learn new things, to fail. I think ultimately, the biggest thing to me, as I said earlier, and I think that we talked about here, is embracing the change, right? We don't know where the world is going to go in the next couple of years, the next 3, 5, 10, 15, 20. And so for anybody, whether we're talking young people who are not so young, being willing to roll with those punches, to me, for a lack of a better adverb, is really, to me, really critical as you go through your career journey. And so, take those opportunities, take those risks, learn from smart people, connect with people who you think you can learn from, and learn new skills from. And ultimately, I think you will be a better person coming out of that. So I think, the platform you've got here and engaging leaders is awesome. And I think it's a pleasure to join you for something of this nature. I think, if we can all help one another, that's really going to make the world a better place as we move forward.
Cool. I could never have put it in those words. So thank you so much for that. Lou, thanks a lot, because I got a few things to discuss with you. And everyone is listening in, share, get people to watch our show. Our numbers have been growing and we need them to grow even larger. So make sure you share this amongst your network of people. And Lou, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Okay.
Take the CEO series with you anywhere, anytime. All episodes are now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major streaming platforms. It's not just an interview. It's a masterclass in leadership.